Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Ankita Jain. I'm a periodontist and implantologist, currently working as a full-time practitioner. First of all, I would like to extend my thanks for my last video on gingivectomy. Now, today's topic will be diabetes and periodontium and its interrelation. This topic is very vast, so will be taken in two parts. Part 1 will cover basics of diabetes, and in part 2 we will discuss the periodontium and diabetes interrelation. Now, before starting with the video, I would like to tell you that from now onwards, I will be sharing one tip in each video, which will help you to make your answers impressive in the examinations. Now, today's first tip is always quote your answers with the references. Reference means a source of information. Reference can be a book, an author of a book, an author of an article, a researcher or a scientist, or it can be an organization like Indian Society of Periodontology, American Diabetic Association, etc. We shall see an example first.
Now, indications of usage of chlorhexidine. It was given by Martin Eddy. So Martin Eddy here becomes the scientist. Periodontology 2000. This is an article and this is the year in which this information was introduced. So here Martin Eddy has given this information in Periodontology 2000, which is a journal, in 1997. This fact is taken from that particular reference. This makes a complete reference for your this statement. Okay. Then next example is periodontal pocket is defined as pathologically deepened gingival sulcus. This is a definition which is taken from a book. So here book's name is Carenza and the edition is 11th edition. So likewise you have to give reference for the facts which you are giving in your answers. Okay. At initial level, try to make a habit to write at least one reference in every answer, and then you will become habitual and you will be able to fetch good marks.
Now I think you are very much clear about the references. Now we shall proceed for our topic, diabetes and periodontium. Lastly, if you have any query, doubt or suggestions, kindly email me or leave your suggestions in the comment section. Thank you.
Let's begin with today's topic, interrelation of diabetes and periodontium, part 1. This whole topic is divided into multiple portions in order to simplify it. So in the first part, we will be covering introduction and definition, classification of diabetes, epidemiology. Then type 1 and type 2 diabetes will be described under following heads: characteristic chart of type 1 and type 2, diagnostic criteria, clinical signs and symptoms, and complications. So this whole will be covered in first portion. In the second portion, we will be taking the interrelation of diabetes and periodontium. That is how diabetes affects the periodontium and how periodontitis affects the diabetic status of an individual. And in the third portion, we will be taking the other types of diabetes, that is gestational, idiopathic and other specific types of diabetes. Introduction and definition. Diabetes mellitus is clinically and genetically heterogeneous group of metabolic disorders. Metabolic disorders are those disorders which interferes with the metabolism of important biomolecules of the body, leading to their either deficiency or excess level in the blood. And in diabetes mellitus, these metabolic disorders are due to the abnormally high level of glucose in the blood. It is also a syndrome. Syndrome is again a collection of disorder due to the chronic hyperglycemia, that means long-term glucose levels in the blood, and leads to the damage to the major organs like heart, eyes, kidneys, nerves and vascular system. Epidemiology. Let's see some numbers about the diabetes. The prevalence of diabetes in India is 11.8%. And this data is taken from National Diabetes and Diabetic Retinopathy Survey 2019. Type 2 diabetes makes up about 85 to 90% of diabetic cases, whereas other 10 to 15% suffers from either type 1 diabetes, gestational diabetes, or other specific type of diabetes. Next is classification of diabetes. So American Diabetes Association classified diabetes mellitus on the basis of pathophysiology of the disease in 2005. It is classified as type 1, type 2, gestational, idiopathic, and other specific types of diabetes. Now we will be taking all these types in detail one by one. First, we will study type 1 and type 2 in these headings. We will study the characteristics of type 1 and type 2 diabetes and simultaneously we will compare them. Etiology. As we all know, pancreatic beta cells are basically responsible for the secretion of insulin. In type 1 diabetes, there is autoimmune destruction of these cells which leads to the loss of insulin. In type 2 diabetes, destruction of beta cells does not occur and patient retains the capacity for some insulin production, but the target cells are not able to use the insulin and the actions of insulin are not achieved. Okay. And second reason may be low and altered insulin production, which may result in hyperglycemia. Type 1 diabetes mainly affects children and adolescents, whereas type 2 affects adult. Type 1 patients are usually lean due to the loss of weight, and type 2 patients are mostly obese, and the percentage of body fat is mainly distributed in the abdominal region. Management. In type 1 diabetes, exogenous insulin is important because body is not able to produce its own insulin, and type 2 diabetes is controlled with diet, exercise and medication. Ketoacidosis is commonly associated with type 1 diabetes and it is a life-threatening complication. Where there is low chances of ketoacidosis in type 2 diabetes, but it can occur in association with stress of another illness such as infection. Risk factors associated with type 1 are genetic predisposition with strong human leukocyte antigen association, DQA, DQB and DRB genes. Whereas in type 2 diabetes, the risk factors are genetic predisposition, increasing age, obesity, history of gestational diabetes and lack of physical activity. It is very important because the deposition of adipose tissue plays an important role in the development of insulin resistance.
Now let's see the clinical features of diabetes through a self-explanatory diagram. Try to represent it like this in exams. It is asked in Viva exams besides the theory. Now the clinical features of diabetes are represented classically by 3 P's, that is polyuria, polydipsia and polyphagia. Polyuria means frequent urination. In hyperglycemic state, glucose is not reabsorbed in renal tubules, resulting in the retention of water in the tubules due to osmotic diuresis, which leads to the more urine formation and more urge of urination. Polydipsia means excessive thirst. Now, frequent urination will stimulate the brain centers about the dehydration in the body, and brain will signal the body to compensate for this water loss. That will lead to the polydipsia, that is frequent thirst. Third one is polyphagia, that is excessive hunger. In diabetes patients, glucose can't enter the cells and cannot be used for the energy due to the low insulin levels or insulin resistance. And since body don't get the energy, there is constant feel of being hungry. But this hunger actually doesn't go away after consuming the food also. Fourth is unexplained weight loss. It is the weight loss which occurs unintentionally and a warning sign of diabetes. As we now know, insufficient insulin prevents the body from getting glucose from the blood into the body. So, when this occurs, body starts burning the fat and muscles for the energy, causing overall reduction in the body weight. This also leads to the fatigue. Next is blurred vision. High levels of blood sugar cause the lens of the eyes to swell up, which results in temporary blurring of eyesight. This may also occur in the hypoglycemic states. When the blood sugar level return to normal, then eyesight also becomes normal. Nausea is another clinical feature. Ketoacidosis is mainly the clinical feature of type 1 diabetes. It is a life threatening condition. It occurs when the body starts breaking down fat at a very fast rate, and liver convert and process the fat into ketones, which increases acidity of the blood and thereby damaging all the vital organs. Type 2 diabetes also have the same features, but the persons or the patients here are actually obese because they have increased percentage of body fat distributed predominantly in the abdominal region. Adipose tissue plays an important role in the development of insulin resistance. So that is all about the clinical features.
Diagnostic criteria. There are three ways to diagnose the diabetes. First is casual plasma glucose concentration. In this, patient's blood is withdrawn at random point of time. If the patient presents polyuria, that is frequent urination, polydipsia, that is frequent thirst, and unexplained weight loss, and casual plasma glucose concentration comes out more than 200 mg per deciliter, then the patient is said to be diabetic. Next is fasting plasma glucose. That is, blood is withdrawn after fasting of 8 to 10 hours. And if the level of glucose come out to be greater than 126 mg per deciliter, then the patient is said to be diabetic. 2-hour post-load glucose. In this, according to WHO, first the patient is given 75 gram of anhydrous glucose dissolved in water. And then after 2 hours, the blood is withdrawn. And then the glucose is measured in that particular blood sample. If the value comes out to be more than 200 mg per deciliter, then the patient is diagnosed with diabetes. Now there is something called glycated hemoglobin or hemoglobin A1C. It is not a diagnostic tool first of all. It is basically done in the patient with the diagnosed diabetes. It is used to monitor the overall glycemic control of the patient.
Okay. Now, how this test works. Numerous proteins in the body are capable of being glycated. Here, yellow dots represents hemoglobin and blue dots represent glucose molecules. A non-enzymatic reaction takes place continuously between glucose molecules and hemoglobin to form glycated hemoglobin, which is very stable and remains glycated for the lifespan of the erythrocytes, which is approximately 123 plus minus 23 days. When the glucose molecules increases in the blood, then the HbA1c molecules also increases. And so, the determination of the glycohemoglobin levels provide estimate of the average blood glucose level over the time. HbA1c is of major clinical value and accurately reflects the mean blood glucose concentration over the last 1 to 3 months.
And it is performed twice a year who are meeting their treatment goals, and it is performed in every 3 months in those patients whose therapy has got changed recently or those patients who are not able to control their diabetes. That means they are not meeting their glycemic controls. Let's see the interpretation. HbA1c values are given in the form of percentage. If the value is less than 6, then it will be considered normal. A normal person usually has HbA1c value between 4 to 6%. This value is expected to be higher in diabetic patients. Higher the HbA1c value, poorer is the control. In patients with diabetes having less than 7% HbA1c value, the treatment plan is considered working and blood sugar is under good control. Blood sugar is maintained with the help of diet, exercise, medication. But in the patients having the value more than 8%, either treatment plans are not working for the patient or the treatment plan is recently changed, but they are considered to be having the poor blood control and it needs physician intervention. So the target value of every diabetic patient should be less than 7%. Next is pre-diabetes. This term is basically are used for those patients which are usually normoglycemic, but in certain conditions they have elevated blood glucose levels. In order to identify such patients, there is impaired fasting glucose and impaired glucose tolerance as a marker. Now, fasting glucose. So in normal patients, fasting glucose will come out to be less than 100. In diabetic patients, it will be more than 126 mg per deciliter. But if the patient have the values between these two, 100 or 126, then it is called as impaired fasting glucose. Similarly, in case of 2 hours post-loading glucose test, if the patient has value less than 140, then patient is non-diabetic. If the patient has value more than 200 mg per deciliter, then the patient is diabetic. But if the values lies between these two values, then the patient is having impaired glucose tolerance. These two basically predict the future development of type 2 diabetes. And IGT, that is impaired glucose tolerance, is a strong predictor of myocardial infarction and stroke. So these patients should be under the observation and should undergo the diabetic checkup every year.
The chronic complications of diabetes are divided into microvascular complications and macrovascular complications. Microvascular complications are more prevalent than macrovascular complications. In microvascular complications, first is diabetic neuropathy. Diabetic foot syndrome is also associated with the diabetic neuropathy. This syndrome is defined as the foot ulcer associated with neuropathy, peripheral artery disease, and infection, and it is the major cause of limb amputation. Second one is diabetic nephropathy. It leads to the damage of kidneys and eventually kidney failure. Third is diabetic retinopathy. It leads to the loss of eyesight. Fourth complication is coronary artery disease and stroke. And fifth is peripheral artery disease. Now, Lowe in 1993 proposed periodontitis, especially aggressive periodontitis, as the sixth complication of diabetes. He proposed this conclusion as a result of various epidemiological studies. And we will study about the interrelation of diabetes and periodontia in the next part.
Now, this is a question bank. So here the basics of diabetes is completed. Now we will cover the diabetes and periodontium interrelation in the next part. The only thing I want to mention is that please remember the values, and the easy way of remembering the values is just go through the reports of the diabetic members of your family as frequently as possible. So you will be able to remember the normal values after that. And always follow the values of the textbook or the values I have given in this video, because the values may differ from lab to lab.
Hope this part is clear to you. So kindly like, share and subscribe onto my channel. Thank you.